Okay, in this demo, we're going to take a look at how to make grid lines in Revit to create our structural system. And this relates to tectonics. And if you Google tectonics, basically it's infusing the built construction methods and structure of a building into the design aesthetic. And basically, we could say that the tectonics of architecture is where we make visible the structural system and patterns that are inherently created by the construction methods as part of the design aesthetic. And I think this is a really powerful idea, and I think it is what makes architecture beautiful. The tectonics, the exposed structural systems, and how things are integrated into one another to create one coherent design and feel. All right. So with that said, let's get into our structural grid and kind of lay down that framework in Revit so that way you can start to develop some of your building's tectonics as we develop the floor plans and the design. So we're looking at, if we did a heavy timber building, there's a general rule of spacing that is about 24 feet column to column. If we did 24 feet column to column, we're going to be around 14.5 inches deep, which basically means that like it would be like your typical like 12-foot ceilings would work pretty well with a 24-foot span. However, if you wanted to go longer than 24 feet, you are more than welcome to. The rule of thumb to know how deep your beam is going to be then is to take that span in feet, turn it into inches, and then divide that number by 20, and that'll tell you about how deep your beam needs to be to span that distance. So a 24-foot beam is going to be about 14.4 inches deep. Of course, this changes based on use, right? If I was supporting a dance floor or something, that would be a lot different than maybe supporting books in a library or an office where people are spread out and there's just light furniture and not a lot of heavy objects around. Or if it was for a manufacturing plant with really heavy industrial equipment, you get my point. It's going to change a little bit. All right, so Trenton, thank you for the file. I'm using this one because it's a good one to kind of show this example because we've got a crazy floor plan that's all organic. Now, my columns don't have to do this shape. My columns can be a pretty straight grid, and I could attach them to a structural floor that mimics that shape, and then I could attach my actual curtain walls to that structural floor. So my columns don't have to be as crazy as the footprint of the building, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to go up to the architecture tab, go to the grid tool, and here I'm just going to do a couple different methods for you. I'm going to draw a vertical line straight down, and I'm going to, since it's a big building, I'm going to click on that and check the box. So the box is checked on both ends, which means this little bubble is going to pop up on both ends. I want to double click in and make sure I'm starting with the number 1. And I'm going to go and copy and paste 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way across. So I'm going to do the copy command. And here I'm just going to show you, all right, 24 feet. Now, if I'm zoomed out a good amount, it's going to snap like every foot here, which is kind of nice. If I zoom in a little further, it's going to start giving me inches as part of my snap. So sometimes zooming in and out helps you with copy and paste because it changes the increment that your snaps move. All right, so I'm going to highlight them all and use my arrow keys to just kind of dial this into where I want my columns to be. So I think right around here looks pretty good. If I needed another column to my left, it's actually easier to highlight all these and move them to the left and add one to the right instead. That's because 1 is here already and 7's here already. So the next one I place, no matter if I do it to the right or the left, it's going to call it number 8. So rather than changing all the numbers again, changing 8 to 1 and 1 to 2, it's easier just to shift them and add one over to the other side. All right, now that we have that, let's go and make another grid line, but going the opposite way. So I'm going to click on this line, and I'm going to go and click from left to right now to make a horizontal row. I'm going to check both boxes in this case, since it's a pretty big building. That way, if I'm zooming in here, I can still see it easy. All right, so now over here, I don't want this to be 8 anymore. I want it to be the letter A. Now that that's A, I'm going to go and I'm going to use a different tool to get these down. So instead of copy and paste, I'm just going to show you another method in case you prefer it. I'm going to use the array tool. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to have a linear array. I'm going to pick where the last one's going to go. So it's going to go from, what happened to my, it's just a glitch. I'm going to click from here to where I want the last one to be. Let's say like way down here. And then how many in between I want there to be. So maybe I want there to be 4. Enter. So then I have a grid that kind of looks like this. If I click on this, I can see that I have 48, 49 feet roughly. So if I wanted to figure out how deep those beams need to be that carry the rest of the other beams that are going the 24-foot span, these beams, in order to carry all those beams going the other way, it's going to be pretty much 49 feet times 12 to get its inches, plus another 4 inches. Divide that number by 20, and that's about how deep those long beams are going to need to be between these two, right? This length. All right, and that's going to kind of define the lowest points in my my livable space, right? From floor to bottom of those beams. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to go and drop in columns at those intersections. So if I go to column, I can go to structural column. I can say at grids, and then I can highlight all these grids and say finish. It's going to make a rectangular column at those spots. Now, if I say cancel for a second, and I say at grids, hold on, before I say at grids, do you see that it's going to go to a depth for top of footing? I want to actually, before I do that, I want to set it to a height of floor 2. That's fine. And then I can say at grids, and I already have my column selected at that time as well. Highlight them all and say finish, and now I'll see them. So then if I go to 3D, I can see all of those columns. Now, I only sent them up to floor 2. You have a couple of options. I can pick a column, so let me go and pick one real quick. And then right-click, say select all instances in project at this point. And what I could do is I could say copy, paste, and align it to selected levels and say give me more columns stacked on top at floor 2. Hold on, undo that. I actually have to send it to floor 3, and it's going to go down to floor 2 with the way these work. So hold on one second. I'm going to say select all instances, the entire project, copy, paste it at align to selected levels, floor 3, okay. And what it did was it took, let me get a different view here. What it did is it took it at floor 3 and it sent it down to floor 2. Because by default, the structural columns want to send it from a level down, which is kind of annoying, but that's fine. So the reason I showed you it this way, this method, is in case you wanted to omit some columns on a different floor. Like let's say on floor 1 you have all your columns, but on floor 2 maybe you're subtracting some to allow for like a big auditorium space or a big cafeteria space or a big gymnasium space where you, like a basketball court where you don't want any columns. Now typically, if you're not going to have columns on the first floor, you wouldn't have them on the second floor as well, and you just have a bigger beam up high that spans that distance. It would be very rare and usually not practical to have a column on floor 2, but not one below it on floor 1. That structurally just doesn't translate the loads very well. It puts a lot of stress on the beams to do something like that. So generally you try to avoid that where you can. All right, now that I have these columns, I'm just gonna say attach top base, and I'm gonna click on my roof here, or should I say Trenton's roof, and then I'll just say detach targets for any ones that can't reach it, like this one over here and this one over here. I'm going to pick the ones that I don't need. I'm going to delete those out now, so I'm kind of cleaning house, so to speak. I'm just going to pick those and delete them. This one here looks like it didn't attach. That's kind of weird. Attach top base. Okay. All right, so now that I have that, it's looking pretty good. Let's go and do one more type of column. Let's do a grid line with an arc. And let's just go and we'll place it kind of like this. And then I'm going to do just a couple of straight grids that intersect that, just so you can see how this would work. So this one right here, it's called E. Let's just go and change that to like X or R for radius or C for curve, whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to call it X 0.0. And then here, I'm going to call this one X 0.1. I'm going to copy an array of this one around. So I'm going to pick it. I'm going to say array. I'm going to do a radial array. And I'm going to say from this center point, I'm going to drag that anchor point right here. I'm going to say, all right, my last one, where's that going to be? So it's going to go from like here to here. And then maybe I want there to be 3. So I'm cool with that. I'm going to hit enter. And it's kind of weird that it made this one called, so I'm going to have to change this to like ungroup it. I'm just going to call it 0.4, and then here, I name this x.2, this one x.3. So if I have this, now I could do, my same command. I could do column, structural column at grids. I would just select these grids and say finish, and now I've got those columns there. All right, now if I wanted to do a kind of a more crazy column, here's a quick trick for you. You can go to the annotate tab. You can do detail line. You can do some kind of like crazy spline. Hit enter. And then for the column line, this would not be typical, but for the grid, we could do pick lines, and you could pick it, sometimes it doesn't like that. You could pick it based on other curves, like this one here. I was hoping we could get it with a detail line, but maybe with the spline, it just won't work. So maybe with a different type of detail line, you could get something like that. Okay, but generally speaking, column lines, they're more organized. They're based on like a diameter or a radius or a length or a straight line. All right, that's it. Hope you like it. Make sure to do that in your project, and don't be afraid to break your column grid if needed, right? So if you needed to take a column and like move it off grid, you can. You can move it off the intersection if you need to, but you do need to locate those where they're going to be. So you would be annotating and dimensioning, right, where that would be off that intersection. So that way it can accurately be constructed. Okay, that's it. Good luck.